Well, hello everyone and welcome back to the May 2024 digest where I talk about everything that I consumed, I guess last month technically in May 2024. And I also pick the next things from your recommendations that I'm going to watch for next month. But anyway, first up we have Tales of the Empire, which is a TV show, a Star Wars TV show. It's 6 episodes long, but it's like barely 6 episodes long because every single episode is like 10 to 15 minutes in length with like 5 minutes of credits at the end, so crazy. And I watched it on the 8th of May, all in one sitting, if you can believe it. And it's a 3 out of 5, okay? So generally, this is split into 2 arcs. There's the Morgan Elsbeth arc, and there's the Barriss Offee arc. The Morgan Elsbeth arc is pretty bad. Like, not just like, it'd be like a 2 out of 5, I think. And the Barriss arc is like really good. So that'll be like a 4 out of 5, and it bounces out to like a 3 out of 5 overall. But yeah, generally, I guess that's my very, very broad, and the majority of my take is just that. Separate to that, I would say visually it looks really good consistently. I think this is, I keep saying this every time a new like animated Star Wars thing comes out, but this is the best that animated Star Wars has ever looked. So yeah, it's really great. And the other thing I really like about the show is the pacing. It's incredibly quick. Like I said, every episode is like 10 to 15 minutes long. There's like big time skips between episodes. I like it a lot. I like those aspects of it, or that aspect of it. But I guess more specifically, so I've got a recap here of Morgan's episode. So the Night Sisters are killed by Grievous, and Morgan leads the daughter of the clan that takes her in to her death, so they die. Then there's a time skip, and then Morgan is pitching ideas to the Empire, and then Grand Admiral Thrawn visits her, and then there's another time skip, and an ambassador for the New Republic confronts Morgan, and Morgan kills her. And to me, this is all very sloppy stuff. I guess the first episode is probably the strongest. Like, it was cool to see Grievous and get another perspective of the Force or the magic of the Night Sisters, like with these mountain people, whatever. I don't know, all that stuff was interesting, but I feel like Morgan's motivations is just so simplistic, I guess, but we'll see. What are my actual things? I said, yeah, my first note. The Morgan storyline is too simple. She does evil by basically enslaving these people and systems because her people died and it made her full of hate. So basically, bad thing happened to her, so she decides to do bad thing to other people because she hates them, or it's like a way of coping or something. I don't know. It was too simplistic. I guess I didn't buy it. I don't like it. Makes her come across as a very boring or bland character. But yeah, what else is there? It's cool to see, the magic thing I already said. It's cool to see another side of the magic and Force. In these episodes, the fight with Rook, or Ruch, or however, I don't know how Thrawn says it, but that thing was really cool. I like that fight. But like, it's just all it's these episodes. I don't have much to say, just beyond saying like at one point, like Admiral Thrawn, I think, is like, so what do you want? What do you want, Morgan Elsbeth? And she's like, revenge. And I'm like, really? I guess you want revenge, but like, who do you want revenge to? Like, it's kind of, in reality, I guess it's the Emperor's fault, but she would kind of blame like Grievous's army, who would be the droids, who would be the people that the Empire defeated, or like the Republic defeated. So she'd be like on the Republic side, but like, I just don't understand who she wants revenge for and why enslaving these systems. Like, who is she punishing, or who is she extracting her like revenge towards? I just don't understand. Now, I don't think it really matters. I think the point is that she's a lost character and she doesn't have a purpose for her. Like, she doesn't have like someone to focus her revenge on, and that's like even sadder or something. But I just find it so boring. Like, it's meant to be like an ironic thing where it's like, in her quest for revenge and seeking revenge for the people or for like the people she lost, she's now causing the same destruction that was caused to her initially to these people here. And it's like, okay, I've seen this story a million times. Doesn't do anything interesting. Her character's very boring. So yeah. And, I have one other miscellaneous minor note on this entire storyline. Believe it or not, I have nothing else to say about this storyline. Is that I find that it's an incredibly big pill to swallow that the New Republic is not going to care that an ambassador just went to this random planet and was executed by the local people on that planet. I feel like that would lead to a lot of trouble for Morgan, and I don't know. Unless she covers it off somehow, I don't know, but it'd be a bit weird. I don't know. Anyway, didn't like this Morgan stuff. The Barriss stuff, I really liked. So a recap here, which also I wrote off the top of my head, and I did watch this on the 8th of May, so it's been a while. But so first we see Barriss in jail right after Order 66, and then she undergoes some tests, and eventually she becomes an Inquisitor. And that's like the whole first episode, which is really good. I like that first episode. Then we get a time skip, and she visits this village on some planet, which is hiding a Jedi. and then her fellow sister kills all the villagers. Then they run into another. Then they actually find the Jedi they were looking for, and her fellow sister tries to kill the Jedi, but then Barriss turns against her and throws her off the cliff. And this was also a really good episode. And this was actually a little bit of an emotional episode with the the little kid who survived all the execution. But I probably have at least one note on that somewhere. Then the final episode, we have another time skip, and Barriss is pretty old now, and she's living a quiet life helping people. And then her fellow sister comes in and kills her, but like kind of accidentally, I guess. But yeah, so this stuff was great. It's a nice, what type of story would you describe this as? It's kind of like a redemption-ish, where it's like she obviously did a crazy, terrible thing initially, which was to blow up a Jedi temple, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. Or maybe it was like a library or something. Maybe it wasn't the temple, or maybe it was a library in the temple or something. I don't know. Basically, she did terrorism and she killed a lot of people, and it was really terrible. And she went into the dark side, and she, bad. We don't like dark side people. But then here she sees how the Empire is not making things any better, and she was never a Sith. She was just against like the Jedi who had failed the world, basically. And now that she's seeing that the new like Republic, not what do you call it, the new, I guess, the Empire is not doing any better, then she's gonna like turn against them and not be part of these like Inquisitors that are seeking these Jedi and killing these villagers in the way, even though they don't have to or whatever. So anyway, cool stuff. Let me see what actual notes I have. The first note actually is that somehow, I don't know how they do it. I say this every time a new Star Wars thing comes up. I'm like, okay, Order 66. It was good this time, but there's no way the next time I see it, it's going to be good. They've done it too many times. There's no way they can do it again and I'm going to like it. And somehow they continue to make it interesting. Like getting the little, like, basically like a slit shot in Barriss' cell and seeing like the Jedi, I don't know what it is, like the Jedi Temple or the Senate or whatever. You're seeing some building in the background and you know that this is like when Order 66 is happening, and it's so cool. Like we haven't seen this perspective before. It's interesting to get like another novel perspective of Order 66, and it works well and I like it. But yeah, the other thing I liked about the scene was that there's the music that they use right at the beginning. I think at the beginning of this particular episode, the first one, when I think she's looking out the window, I should have rewatched this, but it's very reminiscent of the music that you have when Anakin and Padme are like looking out to each other in episode 3, right before like Anakin goes and like kills Mace Windu basically, or takes his arm off. But yeah, that was also really interesting music I really like it in Revenge of the Sith, and it was cool to see it here, to be like reminding you of those times and like Order 66 and what led to it. And yeah, it was cool to get that music again, or a similar kind of vibe of music to that. The other thing was that it was cool to see in this first episode 2 other young Jedi who aren't Sith but are against the Jedi, and we don't really know why, like what their reasons are. We just see that they are against the Jedi, but they're not necessarily like Sith. They don't want to like become evil or anything. They just want to like, or they don't even necessarily want to embrace the dark side or anything, but they just don't believe in the Jedi, which was, yeah, kind of cool to see. We don't get too much of that. But then at the end of this episode, I said this when I first saw the trailer, but I thought it was kind of lame to get an ending with Vader. He basically just like comes in and I'm like, okay, so we've seen the scene like a million times now where, oh my God, it's Vader. We're doing the Vader fan service thing. Now, it doesn't mean just because it's fan service is bad or anything, but I'm like, okay, I feel like I've just seen this scene a million times where people are looking at Vader and they're scared because it's like, oh my God, it's Darth Vader. So I don't know. I was hoping like he'd sit down and maybe say something cool, or like look at Barriss or something to be like, I recognize you a little bit. But no, we got nothing cool. It was just like an entrance. But it was directed cool and everything. It's just, we're seeing the same scene a million times, but yeah. Anyway, I don't even know what this is. Barriss, the kind Inquisitor with good intentions, is a real cute idea, though she probably shouldn't be so naive since they made her kill her fellow trainee last episode. Oh yeah, I guess that's, yeah. Like there is a big time gap, but yeah, it is a little bit unbelievable where it's like, okay, Barriss is a nice Inquisitor who is, trying to look after these people who gave her, like the little kid gave her the information about the Jedi, and she's trying to make sure that these people don't get killed by her fellow Inquisitor or anything. And it's kind of like she's a bit naive to be surprised that the fellow Inquisitor like killed them, because the entire test that it took you to become this Jedi was to kill someone who you didn't need to kill. And it's like, I feel like you should probably know this at this point. So it's a little bit unbelievable, but I can shrug it off and be like, oh, it's fine, whatever. It's her naivety or something, who knows. But then we have the most emotional moment in all of these episodes. Crazy. It came out of nowhere where I'm like, okay, there's more Star Wars. I'm not going to get emotional or anything. But then when the little kid when the entire village is dying, the little kid comes and like grabs Barriss's leg or whatever. And I'm like, oh, this is so cute and sad as well. And really good emotional stuff, which I liked a lot. Then we have Barriss. What is this? Oh yeah, no, it's just me pointing out the funny. Like as soon as she becomes a Jedi again, like my first thought is like, but then didn't you killed like 50 people in that explosion? Then I don't know. It's a bit. I mean, I can accept you as a Jedi, but like still, I don't know. Maybe you should probably be repenting for that somehow. I don't know. Anyway, it's fine. Oh, and then I was like, getting really excited because the next episode was, I don't know if it's at the beginning or whatever, near the beginning. And what am I saying beginning? It's like a 10-minute episode. Somewhere throughout the episode, you see the distance, like Barris is looking off into the distance and you see this figure that's like slowly walking toward her. And it's like, it's like kilometers away and it's going to take ages, but they're slowly walking. And I was excited. I was like, in my notes, I wrote, now this is a good Vader entrance. Like the other one was like really lame. And I'm like, I feel like I've seen this a million times, but here seeing Vader really in the distance and you know, eventually he's going to get to you. It's going to be the coolest thing ever. I can't wait until he comes and kills Barris. It's going to be so sick. And then it turns out it was her master, like her fellow sister or whatever. So it was a bit disappointing. Yeah, I was like, God damn, it was going to be a cool Vader entrance, and now it's just this other character that, you know, it was a cool entrance nonetheless. But the coolness was the fact that it really felt like I was seeing Vader, like his patience, where he's like he can just walk and eventually he'll win. Like he doesn't have to get there fast. He doesn't have to get there in any flashy manner or anything. He just has to arrive and eventually he'll kill her. But no, it wasn't that at all. So yeah, bit of a letdown. But something that was certainly not expected and was not a letdown at all was that they mentioned that Barris had mended her relationship with Ahsoka. I don't think they said they did that way. Definitely didn't say it explicitly, but she said like, "Oh, I have a friend who can come and help you or something. Or if you go to her, she'll help you." And it was really cool. I'm like, "Oh my god, that's cute." After all these years, despite blowing up the temple and framing Ahsoka and all these terrible things that Barris did in her youth, they made up in the end. So it's really cute, and I like that. Now I have a more general note, which is that I realized kind of when I was getting toward the end of this, because something that's interesting when it comes to the Force is that there seems to be like two eras of the Force. One was, I guess, in the prequels, where it's like people can get power, additional power, through using the dark side in a world where the light side dominates. Because when you're fighting the Jedi using anger, it lets you fight in ways that the Jedi don't expect. Or fight in ways that the Jedi can't in that moment. And the Jedi are the power in that situation, and it gives you an advantage. And the example is like Anakin versus Obi-Wan. Now, I can't think of anything that Anakin does, especially dark side or whatever, but the implication is that Anakin was more powerful in that fight because he could use the dark side, I guess. Now, the second kind of thing, or the stage in the Force here, is after like the Empire and everything, where you have the light side giving you power in a world where the dark side dominates. Because the anger that a dark side user would have, it makes you predictable and less clear in your thinking. So it's like the two sides of the Force, where it's like when the one light side dominated, it gave the dark side a power, and when the dark side dominates, the light side becomes the power. And the example, I guess, for this era is like Obi-Wan versus Maul, or Barris versus like her fellow Inquisitor in this episode. So I don't know if that made any sense, but it made sense when I wrote this note. So yeah. What else? Her fellow Inquisitor lady, the Green Lady, which I think I'm meant to recognize. I think I watched the Blind Wave reactions and they said she was like from Obi-Wan or something, but I did not recognize her. But I also felt she was a bit quick to switch sides. Like she was, well, not even necessarily quick, because you can quickly switch sides if something terrible happens and you're like, oh, I understand, I've seen the error of my ways or whatever. But this isn't like, she wasn't just like some Inquisitor who suddenly, or even just slowly became. No, you know, my issue is with her suddenly becoming good again or seeing the light, whatever, is that she was a Jedi Master beforehand, and she had clearly already turned to the dark side before Order 66. So she clearly has a very strong reason for being against the Jedi. And it seems like throughout the entire of Barris's story here, which spanned many, many years, she never once questions it. We don't see her question like, oh, did I make the right choice or whatever? And I think because she was a master before, and the fact that she had already transitioned to becoming on the dark side before Order 66 happened is what it's implied in the first episode. It kind of feels a little bit unbelievable that she would swap so quickly. So, I don't know. And then, of course, we get an ambiguous ending where we're like, we don't know if Barris died. I guess the implication is that she was attacked. Like, oh, I mean, we saw that she was attacked, but she was damaged or whatever. And maybe because her friend is like, she turned to her friend and she's on her side now, maybe she'll save her. But ambiguous, I don't know. I would say, like, what do you guys think, you know? But I'm fairly sure Barris is alive because, you know, they can make future stories with her and it would be great. Her and Ahsoka together when they're both older, that'd be great. Anyway, that was Tales of the Empire. Next up, we have Dororo 2019. So this is an anime. It's 24 episodes long, and I watched it from the 26th of May to the 31st of May. And I just realized the screenshot here says 33rd or whatever, so ignore that. But this was recommended. It won the poll thing, or not the poll, it won the spinning wheel thing at the end, so who knows what the next one will be. But anyway, I have a summary for people who haven't seen Dororo, which you definitely should not watch this if you haven't seen it. Dororo from Google is a mysterious warrior with prosthetic limbs and a young orphan thief travel across Japan fighting demons who threaten humanity. So overall, this is a 3 out of 5. So it definitely wasn't for me. Like, it doesn't kind of appeal to me in the way that a lot of other anime appeal to me, but I generally like the concept of this story, and not the one I just read out, but like the concept of having this person who, as a child, people sacrificed their body, like this child's body. Like when I say body, I mean like their skin, their organs, like their arm, their limb. Oh, sorry, not their organs, I guess, but literally everything besides their organs, like their limbs, their eyesight, their blah, 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 everything for the greater good, quote unquote. They did it so that they could, create peace in the land. And now this person wants to get their body back. And in order to get their body back, they have to kind of undo the peace in the land. And it is like, I generally like the concept. And the show does do some interesting things, which I have a whole section on the three interesting things I guess the show does. So we'll talk about that. But I guess firstly, from a visual standpoint, I think it's quite generic looking. Like to me, the story isn't too generic at all. Like there's a lot of interesting things, I guess, which we'll talk about that it does. But visually, it kind of just looks like any other kind of samurai action shonen kind of show, with one exception. But we'll see. What do I actually have my notes here? I said, I guess, yeah, there's some black and white episodes or scenes, and they look really cool. There's some fights with really cool animation, especially toward the end. And I like the first opening and the visuals and also the audio for the first opening. And also there's one episode, which is episode 15, which stands out as looking notably better than the rest. Oh, not necessarily, like, it's not like better as in like, oh my god, they clearly put all the animation effort into this episode or anything, but to me, aesthetically, the episode 15 looks a lot more interesting than the rest of the show. Like, it feels like they like simplified the character designs and like focused more on like the framing and the storyboarding and the lighting and colors and stuff, and it was way more interesting. And I did look it up, so I was like, why is this so different? And apparently it is directed by like some guest director or something, like some famous director or something, so I guess that's why, but it definitely stood out to me. So yeah, episode 15 was visually really interesting. And I wish the show was, I guess, more like that, more like kind of innovative in the way it looks. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, it was fine. It was just a little bit too generic looking visually. My biggest issue is that I didn't really have much of an emotional investment in this at all, with I think maybe two exceptions where I really suddenly just out of nowhere got really emotionally invested that I guess I'll point out later. But yeah, it just wasn't the story for me, I guess, generally, but it was still pretty good. I enjoyed it. And also, my last overall thought is that I had no idea that Dororo, the character, was a girl. I had absolutely no idea. That was one of the biggest plot twists that's ever happened in my mind, when they, like, at the end of an episode, they just have one line about, like, oh, your sister is blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Dororo is a girl? I couldn't believe it. I can't believe I'd never heard that. Like, everything I'd ever heard about the show was like, oh, it's like two brothers, or there's like a samurai, and in the end, it doesn't really factor much into the plot, besides, I guess, framing Dororo as being an interesting case of like a female warrior, not warrior, but a female character in a male-dominated society here, where like all the men are like fighting and blah, blah, blah. Like, I guess that is like an implicit kind of character aspect to it, but it doesn't really explore it much. But it was really surprising and interesting, so I liked it. Really cool. And it kind of like frames how you see her a bit differently in the society. So yeah. Anyway, I mentioned the interesting things, and I have 3 points here for the interesting things. The first is, of course, the overarching plot, which I guess I talked about before, about like the moral dilemma here. So I said in this note here, the Daigo, which is like the people who sacrificed Hyakimaru, basically, they're trying to kill Hyakimaru, which is this person here who's like, basically as a child, he got sacrificed, and he is there to restore like to maintain the peace in the land. They took his limbs, and as long as the demons keep his limbs, the land will stay at peace or whatever. So the Daigo are basically trying to kill him now so that they can maintain the peace that was created through their pact with the demons. And the question, like the moral question here, or the overarching plot is like, do you side with the demons and use their power for peace? Or do you side against the demons, and do you take the future into your own hands, like into humanity's hands or something? Now, obviously, I would side on, I think most people would probably side on the latter part, where it's like, humans, we want our own freedom. And I think the show, even in the end, kind of, it does land on that side. But this is the interesting dilemma. Throughout the whole thing, you're like, which side are they going to land on? Because they give like it's a very, I was going to say it's very morally gray show, but it probably isn't. It's probably all the characters feel like their motivations are very grounded and realistic. Like the son of Daigo, who is also, I guess his name is Tahomaru or something. Is that his name? Doesn't sound right, but whatever. He is on one side, and he is basically a good person who initially is like, he likes Hyakimaru because he saved him and it was kind of interesting, and he doesn't want to kill him, but he kind of has to do it because it's for the sake of the greater good. And he doesn't do it for an evil reason or anything. Like, he doesn't do it with ill intent. He doesn't do it because like he's a better swordsman than him, or the better brother, or his mother loves him more or something. He just does it because it's like, he truly wants what's best for his people or whatever. And that's it's interesting to have like a side like that, where it's like they're clearly not necessarily villains, but they are antagonists for sure. I don't know. I like it. The overarching plot of the show is definitely the most interesting part of it, I think. The second interesting thing the show does is Dororo's parents' backstory. They are very interesting characters, because in a typical show like this, you would expect the main character who is talking a lot about his mum and talking about his parents and how great they are, you would kind of expect to get the backstory and see them as typically good people. Like to see them as like the moral center who Dororo was inspired by, and she, now we know, she's going to be good like her parents were or whatever. But the interesting thing the show does is that it portrays the parents as more bad and hateable than good and likable, in my opinion. Like the parents were definitely portrayed as weak people who were seeking revenge for the samurai, even when like not realistically, but the right thing to do in their situation in a world dominated by the samurai, where they have a kid that they have to look after and a community that they're responsible for, is not to go and seek revenge or blind revenge when even you're in a stable place and you've killed enough already. You don't have to keep going. The good thing to do would be like step back and kind of look after yourself and your family and your community. But no, they just keep going, and the dad especially, he's driven, and it's, I guess even the mum as well is driven, because you have this one character, I don't remember his name, but he is against it. He's like, haven't we done enough? Let's stop here. We can live forever in peace and whatever. And the dad's like, no, how dare you? I'm going to kick you out I'm going to kill you if you say that or whatever. And then even the mum steps in and she's like, how don't you know what the samurai have done to us? We have to keep going with our mission of revenge, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, it's interesting that the show is portraying these parents in a negative light. That was kind of actually really cool. I like that. But what else have I got here? I guess also in addition to this, something that is never really, as far as I understand, maybe I missed it, but I don't think they ever address it, which additionally adds to her dad being a bad person, is that he'd been storing away the money for the whole time. Like basically they'd kill the samurai, get their revenge, they'd get their like riches from the samurai, and they'd have wealth and they'd store it in their community, and eventually every now and then the dad would like take it away and hide it for himself. And we never really understood why was he hiding it or anything. Did he have a grander purpose, or was he truly doing it for a selfish cause of like looking after his family specifically? But yeah, it kind of, again, portrays the dad in a negative light, which is kind of cool to see. And it's like Dororo she doesn't even realize this. Like she doesn't point it out as like, oh, maybe my dad wasn't a good person or anything. It's like a background element to the show where it never really gets pointed out directly, but they are portrayed as negative people. Really interesting. But then I said, of course, there are good elements to them as well. Like they're not just bad people. They're just slightly portrayed in a negative light. Like for instance, their mission of like trying to get revenge, not necessarily the revenge, but trying to like create a world without samurai is like it's a good thing. Like they have good intentions, or they're doing it with good intentions. And there's also, of course, after Dororo's dad dies, Dororo's mum is very careful and like looks after Dororo and places her in like the utmost like importance. And so she's a good person fundamentally, but not necessarily always portrayed in a good light, which I thought was really interesting. And the final, I guess, element here, which is interesting, is I don't know if this is necessarily interesting or just I kind of liked it when I saw it, which is the mum of Hyakumaru and Tahomaru coming at the end and kind of giving this message about how like what's this quote here? What we cannot obtain with our own hands, we cannot protect. And it's kind of like the message of the show, where it's like, if we rely on these demons and their power, then what can we achieve? We're at their whims, we're at their mercy or whatever. I guess it's not necessarily the point of the show, because there's more to it. Wait, let me just go through my note here, but this is more what it is, where it's like the prosperity of the land is fragile because it relies on the sacrifice of one person. So you're like relying on the demons and their power and a single person suffering so that the land can kind of prosper. And the land that is built on that kind of suffering on a single person is very fragile, and it's not going to last. And it should be built through like mutual cooperation and, relying on the power of humans rather than like some extraterrestrial power that requires sacrifice. I don't know. I kind of liked it. It was really cool. Then I said, and the old man makes an interesting point. Either you can use your own strength and become a demon yourself, or give away all your power like the Buddha. Either way, you aren't human anymore. The implication is that to be human is to struggle with power and purpose. I kind of like that. And then Dororo kind of retorts that and says, as long as you have a strong heart, you won't become a demon, which is what is proved in the end, where Hyakumaru, has the opportunity to kill his dad and he doesn't. So I kind of liked all this like resolution stuff toward the end, like how they kind of reflect on the bigger thing that I was talking about at the beginning about how, like, is it right to sacrifice a single person for prosperity? And they kind of criticize that in the end and be like, no, we can't necessarily rely on a single person. No, you know what? I probably should have thought more about this. Is that really the message, where it's like we shouldn't rely on a single person? We should kind of work together to achieve this common end? Because there's also the scene where you've got Hyakumaru talking to his dad, and the dad realizes, which I think is a really cool scene, where the dad's like, if only I never sacrificed you, because if you are truly my son and I never harmed you or anything, and seeing the strength that you have before me now to spare my life and have this conviction to be a human and to do good, if only I hadn't sacrificed you back then, because through your singular, like, strong spirit, you could have created this peaceful land by yourself. So I guess there is kind of like a mix of like a single person, as long as they have a strong heart, like Dororo says, they probably could make the world a better place. Maybe that's more the actual point of this thing, where it's like it's an anti-demon story or an anti relying on the power and like it's not necessarily like a supernatural power because you have to apply it to real life. It's like not necessarily relying on the power of the few, but relying on the power of an individual and maybe the power of like multiple individuals working together, each with strong hearts or something. I don't know. I should probably think more about this, and I'm sure there's like video essays and analysis or whatever, but generally I find the ending and how the show addresses these kind of things really interesting. But anyway, now we have a bunch of highlights. These are just like a bunch of scenes and moments and stuff that I think is really good. So first we have episode 3, which is the backstory for Hyakimaru's adoptive dad, basically, or we'll get to what he calls him later, but that was really cool. He's like a man who was in a war and then he like left the war and felt bad about it. And then he atoned by kind of making these prosthetics and helping out all these people. That was really cool. I loved him as a character. There was a really cool this is probably the best bit of animation. Not the best, like, oh my God, it's crazy animation, but it was crazy animation. But there's more like crazy animation later. It was just a really cool sequence where the old blind man, which I don't know his name, but he like shows up when they're fighting a demon that looks like a bird. This is like really early on. And he like does this like really cool like sword thing. And like the animation is really cool. And even after he like does the slash and you see the bird die, he's like moving a bit weird and interesting. That was really cool. Probably the best, like, interesting looking visual in this whole show. It was quite early on, so that was cool to see. The death of the girl and the kids, who, like, Hyakimaru was obviously in love with the girl or whatever. That was emotional stuff. I really like that. Especially when I heard Hyakimaru scream, I got chills. I'm like, oh my God, he's like yelling, like because he doesn't really know how to speak at this point, but he's yelling and he's like killing all these people. And that animation was really cool. Like even I got emotionally invested. This is one of those like moments, like one of maybe like 2 or 3 moments in this whole show where I really got invested. So that was a really cool sequence like that. I love the episode with the spider or spider demon or whatever, where it's basically she's never killed her prey. That's kind of the reveal we get at the end, where the guy who saved her, he says, "You never have and you never will." And it's like, oh, it's just so cute. This demon who like kind of wants to live in unison with her prey, and if she kills them, they'll never come back and help her. So it's like a mutual kind of helping thing. I really liked it. It was cute. I liked the scene where Hyakimaru says Dororo for the first time, and they like kind of walk off into the sunset or into the distance, I guess. And it's like, oh, this is cute. It's like the name of the show. He's saying it. Love it. Name of the girl, obviously. And then we have the best scene, which I had to tweet it out when I watched it because it was the goddamn best thing this show has ever done, which is the scene where Hyakimaru's adoptive dad is like, oh, Hyakimaru asked him, like, what's your name? And he's like, oh, my name is, no, you don't need to know, I'm nobody. And then Hyakimaru is like, I know what you are. And then there's a pause and it's like mama or like Okachan. And it's like, and then the guy, what makes this scene even better is that you've got the guy responding and is like, silly you, that's not what I am. And he's like tearing up and stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is adorable. And the fact that like, it works so well because it's a subversion firstly, because when you're watching this scene, he's like, when Hyakimaru is like, I know what you are, obviously he's going to be saying my father or something, because it's like, even though technically it's not his dad, it's the person who raised him, it's the person who like taught him everything he knows. Oh, you're my dad or whatever. But no, he says mama or like Okachan, because that's what like Dororo has been saying this whole time. And to Hyakimaru, there is no concept of gender when it comes to someone raising you. It's so good. And the fact that like the adoptive dad, I don't know his name, but just the fact that he knows it's funny, but he knows that this is the most earnest and honest thing that Hyakimaru could have said in this moment. And he just appreciates all that and like cries about it and laughs about it at the same time. It's the best scene in this show. It's the best thing the show does. And it comes out of nowhere. So yeah, it was really, really good. I also like the cute opposite talking episode where basically everything you say is like the opposite, and everyone's like talking about how this girl is like really ugly on her wedding day and they hope they break up, and I'm like, what's going on here? And it took me way too long to realize that it was like a opposite day thing, but it was really cute. I like that episode. Then there's this I was really invested in this scene, which is when Dororo's hand is basically stuck in a rock and Hyakimaru just doesn't have the strength to kind of move the rock because his hands are like made of prosthetics and, or made of wood, I guess, at that point. And I thought Dororo was going to die in that moment. And the reason the show was named Dororo was because it was like the legacy of Dororo is what's going to inspire Hyakimaru in the future or whatever. But then the old man comes in and like swipes the rock and like pushes it out of the way. And I was like, I was incredibly like engaged and invested in that scene. And I thought that Dororo was going to die there. So that was really cool. Then we have the fight between Hyakimaru and his brother, as well as his friends. So I think this was the one where on top of the cliff, and it's the one that ends with like the white horse coming in and stopping them, if you remember that. So it's like toward the end of the show. But that was really good, especially just how quickly Hyakimaru shows up and like basically takes off the limbs of Tahomaru's friends. And they're not bad people or anything. So you feel bad, but you also feel like they're trying to kill Hyakimaru for something that isn't his fault. And it's like, it's a really ambiguous fight where you're like, oh, no one is like completely wrong here, but you've permanently taken off these people's arms. And like, yeah, I don't know. It was really, I was very invested there. Yeah, I really like that. Well, I guess even especially because we know that like the girl, like one of the, I guess they're not brothers, right? You got the brother and his like two friends that like are looking after him. I think it's like a brother and sister there. And the sister's especially sick at this moment. So you know that if you chop her arm off, she's going to die as well. And it's like, God damn it. This is, yeah, I was really invested. Anyway. And just generally, I really like that trio of characters and like the love that the brother had for his like two friends who had been there for him his whole life, basically. I really like that. The final fight had really good animation. I said that already. And I really like the scene at the end where it's like, I mentioned it before, but Hyakimaru choosing to be a human in the end and spare his dad. And then his dad, like I said, realizing that if only I hadn't sacrificed you, because through your strength, I know that you could have probably, you know, brought about the prosperity of the land that I required the sacrifice for. And it's like he did it foolishly in the end. And, you know, I really, really like that. Oh, and then I have two miscellaneous notes, but one is that we get a few kids in this with lost limbs, and it's the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life. Especially the first one we get. I think it's like the first one where it's like, I think it's someone, I don't know who it is. Someone runs into this mother and the son, and they're like, please help. A samurai like came out of nowhere and just chopped my son's arm off. And it's like this kid who clearly doesn't know what's happening, and they're like crying, and like they don't have an arm and they're never going to get it back. And it was just so sad. So yeah, that was, yeah, really emotional stuff. And then my question was like, why is the show called Dororo when clearly Hyakimaru is like the more focused on character? The central character is obviously Hyakimaru. So I don't really understand why it's Dororo. I truly thought it was going to be like an inspiration thing where it's like Dororo dies and Hyakimaru was like inspired by Dororo. But I guess it could just be about the relationship that Hyakimaru and Dororo have. And Dororo was the title of the show because that's the word that Hyakimaru says for the first time ever. It's the first word he says or something. I don't know. So it could be something like that. But anyway, that was Dororo. A very interesting show. 3 out of 5. Next up, we have The Triplets of Belleville. Or I believe it's called Belleville Rendezvous or something like that. But The Triplets of Belleville is the title that I purchased it on YouTube for, or like rented it or whatever. 2003. This is a movie. It's an hour and 20 minutes long, and I watched it on the 31st of May. And this is recommended to me a very long time ago by Ciclet, who is a person who watches, you know, this stuff and recommends me stuff and makes YouTube videos as well. Go check him out. But this is a 5 out of 5. This is a fantastic movie. I had no expectations going into this. I just knew it was like a kind of animated, weird kind of movie, but my goodness, it was just very engaging from beginning to end. That was what I would say. Like, I never wanted to like pause it. I was just like, I'm invested. I don't really care about like larger themes or anything. That didn't bother me. I was just like, I didn't even consider it, think about it. I was just like, I'm invested. Like, this is so engaging, just seeing what's happening on screen. It's all wacky and just good looking, and my goodness, I loved it. But overall thoughts, let's see. Firstly, visually, a beautiful movie. The animation, the art, the directing, the world, it feels incredibly lived in. Like, it feels like an alive world and really interestingly art and stuff. It was just really cool. Visually, beautiful movie. Love it. And it kind of feels rotoscoped at points. I'm sure it was probably a lot of rotoscoping, but yeah, just really cool. Very engaging and a perfect runtime. Yeah, I'm very glad this was kind of short movie. It was like an hour and 20 minutes. Fantastic like that. I would describe this movie as descriptive hyperrealism, the movie. There's a lot of scenes in this where it's obviously a caricature or like a hyper-realistic depiction of something that is incredibly real. It feels like a very real movie where you're seeing certain scenes, which I have a list of them later on, where it's like, oh my god, I can relate to this. But here the movie is kind of exaggerating it, and through its hyper-realism, it's being incredibly descriptive of reality. So I thought that was really cool. And then it's a mix of absurdist comedy and universal themes. I guess we'll get to the universal themes. I don't know. Oh, and then my one bit of criticism is that I think the chase at the end is a bit too long. Basically, they're getting chased by the mafia or something, and that goes on for, I don't know, like 10, 15 minutes. It felt a little bit too long. For a movie that otherwise transitioned between like certain parts of it very quickly, that kind of held on that a bit too long. But anyway, my one piece of criticism. Now, my first actual big note here is about like, what is this movie about? Now, firstly, it probably isn't about anything. You know, it's probably just a nice, engaging film that I love to watch. So these themes don't mean anything to me really at this point. But the first thing I thought of is anti-Americanism, because Belleville is portrayed basically as New York, I think, and there's like a lot of really fat people and everything, and it's portrayed in a very negative light. And you know, the old lady doesn't really like it here, so it's kind of anti-American, I guess, maybe. Another really big theme in this is tradition, where you've clearly got this thing of this old woman who's not selling her home, and they like get that train that's built right outside her window that a dog's barking at all the time. And you've also got like the woman who is getting her son the bike, like when he was young, so that he can be in the Tour de France, like maybe his dad used to be. I think it's implied that the dad also was like a bicyclist or something, and it's kind of like the tradition, the family tradition, buy the kid a bike so that he can be like his dad or whatever. And I don't know. I feel like tradition is probably a part of this movie. As well as another theme is the universal human experience. And the one thing that feeds into this, the main thing, is that you've got the old woman at the beginning who is kind of living with the train outside her house because she didn't want to move. And then you've also got the old women who are the Triplets of Belleville, I think, who are kind of like washed up singers and performers. And they're also living in Belleville, but they're living with like a train outside their house, living a very like kind of quiet, simple life, just like the lady who was living really far away. So it's like the universal human experience. We're all living very similar lives in different places and different contexts. But yeah, those are like the three main things I kind of took from this. But back to what I was saying about the caricature of life and like the hyper realism and descriptive realism. I have a list of stuff here that I think is really interesting, or really like hits the nose on like things that are very, you can understand. Like I feel like I've seen this before in real life, you know. The first one is the cycling up the giant hill. Like basically when he's practicing, when he's got his bike before the Tour de France or whatever, he's cycling and it's like an insane slope, right? And it's like he's slowly, like one turn at a time, he's like going up, and that's like the descriptively, everyone's like done it. We've all like ridden up a hill on a bike, and it just takes a lot of effort. But this is like an extreme hill, and it's like so slow, and you know, that's what makes this movie so interesting, is the really caricature, like hyper realistic kind of stuff. You have the dog that's barking out the window at the train every single time. It's not like, oh, the train's there, you know, maybe this time I won't because I'm so hungry or distracted. Every time the train is there, he barks, and he barks for ages. And that's kind of like realistic, where you're like, yeah, dog will bark, it always barks, but not necessarily every time, and not necessarily the exact same way every time. And it's not like the dog has this schedule like it's portrayed in this movie. Like it was just hyper realistic. Love it. You have the waiter that he's like completely bent over, like in a really, you know, caricature kind of way when he's serving the people. And then as soon as like something wrong happens and the dog has like annoyed the mafia guy, he's like profusely apologetic, and he's like bowing and groveling, and he's doing it for like hours and hours or something. It felt like ages, and it's like that kind of hyper realistic, descriptive, realistic thing. You have the old ladies in their house where they're like wearing their nightgowns and watching TV in a dark room, and they're laughing, and it feels very like realistic and real, you know. You have another like element of the caricature, which is like the giant ship, which is like the majority of the ship is like 90% out of the water, and you have this like tiny little thing in the water, and it's like just the absurdism of that, and how, you know, because when I think of a boat, I do think of like the old saying where it's like, oh, for an iceberg, like 90% of the iceberg is under the water, but here like 90% of the ship is like out of the water, and it's like, oh, funny, I like it. And even like the descriptively hyper real thing of whenever the old lady like moves her glasses up, her like eyes move up with it, because it's like, obviously when you're really old, you got those thick glasses, and it really feels like the eyes are like built into the glasses because of how they magnify it and everything. And you know, love it. There's so many interesting, funny, cool caricatures of life that are in this movie that I like a lot. That's just some of them, you know, just the ones I could think of at the end of this movie when I thought of them, but that was great. Now I have a few very miscellaneous notes, okay? We have the song at the beginning, the Belleville Rendezvous is I believe what it would be called, but I love it. I've listened to it so many times after the movie. It's just like, it's so good. I don't even know what makes it so good. It's the fact that there's like simple lyrics. It's like I don't know, it's a catchy tune. I love it. Great song. And another thing is that it's a very dialogueless movie. There's basically very little dialogue. There's a few lines in French that I could genuinely get the gist of what they were saying just by like, oh, there's like common words between French and English. And like, I get what they're saying. But generally, this does a very Tom and Jerry like thing, which I love Tom and Jerry. So this was kind of cool to see it, which is that, and I'm sure it's like based on some genre of filmmaking back in like the 60s or something. I don't know. But it does this thing where there's no dialogue, but sometimes there is dialogue, and it just like, it doesn't quite fit the scene. Like my go-to example in Tom and Jerry, not go-to example, but like the thing in Tom and Jerry is like, sometimes there'll be like a human that will come in the frame, or they'll be on the phone, or they'll hear a human, and the human is like speaking nonsense, but they're speaking and you hear a human voice, and it's like, it's a bit weird. This movie kind of does stuff like that as well, where it's like, there's generally no actual dialogue in the movie, but whenever there is dialogue, it kind of feels a bit nonsensical, and like it comes out of nowhere, and kind of, it's a bit jarring. And I don't know how to describe it beyond saying it feels like Tom and Jerry. So I don't know, if anyone can relate to that, please let me know if there's like some name for this kind of dialogue in a movie, but I don't know, it was really cool. Another thing is that I'd love to watch this with someone, like to see someone's reaction to it. Basically, I did look up like reaction videos to this, and there's none of the big channels have done it, but it was like one small channel that I saw that did it, and it was fun to see their reaction. It's a very react worthy movie, I think, because of just how the absurd stuff that's going on, and also just the hyper real stuff where people can be like, oh my god, look at him, it's like going up a cliff and it's so, or going up a hill and it's so steep, oh my god, crazy. Oh, another miscellaneous note. I talked about this on stream the other day, which is that some of this movie felt so familiar to me. And the go-to example was the scene where you have the dog that's like his owner, the guy who was a cyclist. He's like cycling the dog who's on like a train, and it turns out they're like cycling around the dog's bowl or something. And it's like one of the dreams, the really funny dreams, the grayscale dreams that the dog is having. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, I've definitely seen this. And I think it probably would have been Ciclet sending a clip like years ago, or maybe like a year ago or something. But that was very familiar. Now, the other option is maybe I saw this in English class, but I feel like almost certainly not, because I didn't remember anything else from this movie besides like very few scenes. So anyway, turns out the whole thing is a movie that an old man is watching, probably the bicycle man when he's older. I don't know, it's just it happens at the end. I didn't really know what to make of it, but yeah, I guess they play with the meta a few times, because the opening scene to this movie is like, it's the singers, the Triplets of Belleville, like singing something, and then you like pan out and you realize that someone is watching the movie that you were just watching, and it's like, okay, one meta aspect there. And then at the end of the movie, you find out that what we just watched was like another layer back. Someone was watching that movie, and that person was watching that movie, and it's like kind of the meta thing. But I don't know, it was kind of cool. And then my last miscellaneous note has nothing to do with the movie, but the fact that I rented this on YouTube. And on YouTube, when it comes to movies that you rent, you can actually leave comments and like read other people's comments. It's basically just like any other video on YouTube. Like you can like it and see how many likes it got. And I was the first comment. No one had left a comment. So if you ever rent this video on YouTube, you'll see my nice comment, which is like, great movie. I can't believe I'm the first person to comment. So yeah, that was kind of funny. I wish it showed you how many views it had now. That would be a funny metric, but no, it doesn't tell you. Anyway, that was Triplets of Belleville, a fantastic movie, which I would recommend that anyone watch. This is accessible to all ages. There's nothing like crazy where it's like, oh, if you like horror, you're not going to like this or whatever. It's a fantastic movie. Anyone can watch it. Now we have the 2024 rankings so far. So, I'll just read out, I guess, number 15, Tales of the Empire. Then we have Dororo, which is slightly better than it. And then all the way near the top, we have Triplets of Belleville, one of the best things I've seen this year, but still the lowest of the 5 out of 5s, right? The Menu and Heavenly Delusion, they're still yet to be topped. Now, we're going to choose what to watch, okay? So I guess just to summarize the rules here, in case you weren't here last time, if you go to eliteari.com, you can suggest things for me to watch. It'll kind of look like this if you're on mobile, or you can do it on desktop. You can suggest movies, anime, TV shows, and hopefully in the future I'll open it up to like games and books or whatever. But when you suggest something, I will be able to either approve it or reject it. And if it gets approved, then it will be up for every month. I'll spin a wheel and I'll get to select something to choose. Now, the first rule is it has to be something that I can watch legally in Australia. Like I can stream it, rent it, or buy it if it's like within like a reasonable, affordable range. So for instance, of the like 30 things that are on this wheel or that have been selected for this month, I think like 5 of them I couldn't really put on the wheel because like there's nowhere to watch them legally. For example, Berserk 2016. What a shame. The next thing is that the probability of being selected for this wheel is inversely proportional to the length. So basically, whatever's on the wheel, the shorter shows will be will be more likely to be selected, and the longer shows like One Piece will be like way less likely. So for example, This Is England has a 9% chance of being selected, whereas One Piece has a 1% chance. So yeah. So I'm going to spin this wheel as many times as it takes so that the things that I select count up to at least 4 hours, basically. So for example, if I roll Naruto, then I would stop there. Okay, Naruto, more than 4 hours of runtime, that's all I'm going to consume. But if we roll a 1.5 hour movie, then we can keep rolling, basically. We can pick another thing and another thing until we get to at least 4 hours of stuff. So as soon as we meet 4 hours or get above 4 hours, then I'm done. We're not rolling anymore. So yeah, and I guess the last technical thing is that we're rounding the length of something to the nearest half hour. So an anime is assumed to be 23 minutes. So say overall, if it's like 9.75 hours, we're rounding that up to 10 hours or whatever. But anyway, those are the rules. So now let's spin it. Okay, you can't see me, but I'm here, okay? So assume I'm in the bottom right corner, but you can't see me because I haven't set up the scene properly. Anyway, we're going to spin this. Let's see what we got, okay? First up. Oh boy. Okay. I just really hope just don't be like something really long, okay? That's all I ever want. Give me a nice movie, something really short that I can consume in 1 month easily. Oh boy. Oh no, it's gonna be Top Boy. Okay, Sound of Metal. Okay, Jesus Christ. All right, well, Sound of Metal is the first thing. How long is that? Sound of Metal, 2 hours, so we can go again, okay? We can remove it. And then we can spin it again. And I guess let's see. What's it gonna be? Is it gonna be One Piece? Is it gonna be... Did I say Mr. Robot there? Is it gonna be Mr. Robot? Shogun? Naruto? Oh no, okay. Mary and Max? Okay. So that is a movie. How long is that? 1 hour and a half. So that's 3.5 hours we're on at the moment. Okay. Wait, are we? Yeah, 3.5, I think. So one more time. Okay. Oh, Jesus. These things are looking way too big. Oh no. Oh, jeez. It's so scary. Okay, and Shogun. Okay, fantastic. Okay, now I guess I should go back to the other main scene here. Is it? Okay, perfect. All right, well, enjoy. Okay, I guess I'll be watching those 3 things next month. Yeah, make sure you go to the website, recommend things, and see you next month, I guess.